Hey guys, it's Mike here, and in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Creed 2. Directed by Stephen Caple Jr. and starring Michael B. Jordan, Creed 2 is the 8th movie in the Rocky franchise and the second focusing on Apollo Creed's son, Adonis. Now, I'm a big fan of the Rocky movies. I've been watching these movies since I was a kid, and it's one of my favorite movie franchises. Although it's had its ups and downs, such as with Rocky V, the series returned to greatness with Rocky Balboa and then the first Creed. The direction of Ryan Coogler and the acting from Michael B. Jordan and Sylvester Stallone were all excellent in the previous movie, and it made for one of the top Rocky movies of all time. With that being said, Creed 2 had a lot to live up to, and fortunately, upon seeing this movie, I'd have to say that it was great. Creed 2 follows the story of Adonis Creed, who is now further along in his boxing career and at the top of the game. With Rocky by his side, Adonis becomes the new heavyweight champion of the world. However, on the other side of the world, Viktor Drago, the man who killed Adonis's father Apollo Creed, is training his son to be the greatest boxer in the world in order to reclaim their lost glory. Adonis must decide whether or not he wants to fight Viktor Drago and potentially lose everything in the process. Now let's start by talking about the actors in this movie. Michael B. Jordan once again returns as Adonis Creed, and he does a great job here. During this movie, his character is at the top, being the new champion, but he really doesn't feel like it, especially once Drago comes back into the picture. The return of the man who killed his father is a big factor here, and Drago gets under his skin, as does Viktor, his son, who is played by Floridian Munteanu. There's a number of parallels between the two of them, however many of them are shifted. While Adonis grew up in his father's home with Apollo's wife, Viktor lived in misery as he and his father were cast out by their society after Ivan Drago's loss to Rocky in Rocky IV. One of them was raised in a loving home, the other raised in hate, as Rocky puts it. And this is what causes so much of the conflict between the two. Both of these actors did a good job here, Michael B. Jordan especially, as he proves once again to be a really great actor, and perhaps one of the best of his generation. While this is going on, Adonis is also having to consider what he's really fighting for, as he and his girlfriend Bianca, played by Tessa Thompson, have a child. So this puts Adonis's life into an entirely new perspective. Tessa Thompson also does a good job here in the movie. She pretty much fills the Adrian role here from the earlier Rocky movies, supporting Adonis and providing a voice of reason at times when he's struggling. There's a number of scenes that feel straight out of earlier Rocky movies between the two of them, but that's to be expected in such a long-running franchise. Dolph Lundgren also makes his return to the series as Ivan Drago, and he does a really good job here too. One thing this film did exceedingly well here was fleshing out the antagonists, because as we actually witness Drago's life after the events of Rocky IV and where he is now, we can definitely sympathize with him. His loss to Rocky ruined his life, and those around him abandoned him, including his wife. As a result, he hung on to that hatred for decades, using it to make his son into the fighter that he was by the time of this movie. Although he's still the man who killed Apollo Creed, he's also struggling to regain what was taken from him, and you feel bad for him and his son at points because of this, especially because this hatred has been passed down for generations. That's a big part of the story, as the past and present generations collide. And of course, Sylvester Stallone once again returns as Rocky, which for me is really his defining role as an actor. Every time he returns to this role, he gives his all and gives some great emotional performances. During the film, Rocky struggles with what happened in Rocky IV, holding on to the blame for not throwing in the towel during Apollo's fight, and he doesn't want history to repeat itself. He has to decide whether it's in the best interests of Adonis to take this fight. As a result, the two of them have their problems, but they still have this strong family bond between the two of them. And Stallone has done a great job of transitioning into the role of trainer, essentially becoming like Mickey over the course of the series. And while it would have been cool to see him have another fight in the story, this is now the story of Adonis Creed, and Rocky serves to guide him along his journey. Another thing I want to mention is that this film has a lot of parallels to Rocky IV. Obviously, Ivan Drago is back in the film, but this film feels like an inverse of that story in many ways. There's even a number of similar story beats, with Adonis serving equal parts the role of Rocky and Apollo here. However, unlike IV, this movie isn't pure montages and obvious political messages. Although there still are some good training montages that will pump you up, but this is more of a personal story on both sides, even though I do still enjoy Rocky IV. And getting into the direction here, Ryan Coogler did not return to this film, and the directing duties were instead taken over by Stephen Caple Jr. However, while directorial changes can sometimes ruin movies, I think Caple did a good job here. He was able to get good performances out of his actors, and the way that he set up the fights was good for the most part. I'm not sure any of the fights here were as good as the one-take fight scene from the first Creed, but I think the final fight was great. Overall, I do prefer Coogler's direction, but I think that Caple did a fine job here continuing the story. When it comes down to my ranking of this within the Rocky series, I'd say that it definitely fits into the top 5. While that might not sound impressive due to there only being 8 movies in the franchise, there are some great movies in this franchise, with my favorite being Rocky III. I'm also not quite sure I like this as much as the original Creed, but after I go back and rewatch all of them in the future, my opinion might change. So overall, Creed II is another great entry into the Rocky franchise that lived up to most expectations. It did a great job developing the protagonist and antagonist of the movie and showing Adonis' journey to the top. If they end up doing a sequel to this, I'm not entirely sure where they take it, but given how well these two turned out, I'd be on board to see it. I'm going to give Creed II an 8 out of 10. If you're a fan of the Rocky movies or are looking for a good movie to see in theaters, I'd highly recommend checking this one out. For those of you who already have, what did you think about this movie and where would you rank it among the other Rocky movies? Let me know down below. Also, if you're new to this channel, then make sure to subscribe and enable notifications so you can see all of my videos right away when they come out. And make sure to stick around, because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe, enable those damn notifications.